All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the DC Scrum user group. As always, we are here to connect, share, and learn about all things Agile and Scrum. My name is Fadi Stefan. I'm going to be your host for this evening. Quick announcements, and we will get started. First, a big thanks to our sponsors, Excella and Kaizenko. Excella um, has open positions and is hiring. So if anybody's interested, please reach out and I will connect you. Kaizenko has discounts on Scrum training. Again, if anybody's interested in Agile or Scrum training, please reach out and I will connect you. Last month, we had two talks, Beyond Safe and Scrum, picking up the right framework for your organization. The recording for that is now up, available on wdcsug.com. We also had a talk on Beyond Software, how to apply Scrum beyond just the development team. And that talk is also up, available on wdcsug.com. Next week, we have a special event in collaboration with the New York City Lean Kanban user group. This is going to be an active participation, a game in system dynamics that's going to be hosted and run by Ihab Al-Badri. So that's July 14th at 6 p.m. All right. We always kind of pause to see if anybody's hiring or if anybody is looking. I'm going to ask you to use the chat. If you're looking for a job, just put in your name, quick intro, and email address. If you are hiring, also feel free to add that to the chat and I'll make sure everybody gets connected. All right, so that is it for intros. We are gonna move on to today's talk, Agile Scaling, 3 factors you need for success. And I'm so glad Nicole is here to join us. So quick intro on Nicole, and then I'll let her introduce herself. Nicole has over 20 years of experience working in the IT industry. Her mission is life of learning, and she has obtained many Scrum certifications as well as Agile Scaling certifications, and is a certified professional Agile coach. She specializes in team coaching, facilitation, and empowerment, has worked with several government agencies on their Agile transformation. Nicole is also a core member of the Agile in Color group, as well as co-organizer of the DC Women in Agile group. Nicole, so glad to have you. I'm going to switch it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Fadi. And let me just make sure I am sharing so that everybody can see.
We're good.
You're good? You can see? All right. I just want to make sure because my screen is looking a little weird. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get into it, I just want you to take a minute and read this quote and just think about it for a second. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with agility at all? But I just want you to think about it, what it conjures up in your mind, and keep that thought in your back pocket as we go along on this journey. All right. So yes, we will be talking about Agile scaling and the factors for success. So let's get right into it. But before that, even though Fadi kind of covered all of the aspects about me, yes, I do work for Excella, but the interesting fact about that is I learned about Excella when I first attended DCSUG, way back in the day before the ATX and all the fancy stuff that Excella has now. So it's like full circle for me. And yes, I've been working in software for over 20 years. And then in the last 10 years or so, I entered the government space and Agile at the same time. But before that, I was mostly working in private sector financial market. And I am a co-organizer for DC Women in Agile. We meet every 4th Monday of the month, just a shameless plug there. So feel free to join us. And a member of the Agile Alliance Initiative, Agile in Color. And last but not least, I do like learning. I try to attend as many meetups as I can to learn something new every day. And so hopefully I will give you another nugget today to take home with you today. All right, so that's enough about me. Let's find out more about you. So what I'm going to do is I am going to paste this Menti link in the chat and find out a little bit about your scaling experience. So let me know whether you're on a scaling project or not, and if you are, how many teams you're working with. Make sure this is open. And we start a little countdown so we can just get a lay of the land to see who we have in the Zoom room. All right. So it's pretty even. Let's see, 2 to 4 teams is sneaking out ahead of everybody else as we get some more votes in. All right, I don't see any more movement, so let's just close voting. All right, so it looks like about almost half have like 2 to 4 teams, and then like a good mix of, there are a couple people with more than 10 teams, so my hat's off to you. All right, now that we got a little lay of the land and who's in the room, I just want to talk to you a little bit about my scaling experience. So just move some things around here. So I have worked in the government space for a while, and I've been on at about 8 different government agencies on about 10 different Agile initiatives. But in terms of Agile scaling initiatives, there are 5 that I will speak to during this talk. But the content that I'm going to share really can apply to any organization. So over our time together, you might hear me talk about Department of Justice, Secret Service, the U.S. Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, USCIS, or Veteran Affairs. And the work that I did at these agencies covered many different scaling approaches, from safe to less to something that's a little more custom, but that aspect really didn't influence any outcome or particular pattern. So here's a lay of the land on how we're going to proceed forward. So what you'll come to understand is about these 3 factors that I uncovered that impact your ability to scale agility effectively in your organization. And as I describe each one, I'm going to provide an example of an anti-pattern I've seen, which I'm calling valleys, and then an example of where this factor was applied successfully, which I'm calling peaks. And as we explore, just keep in mind that really the secret sauce here is to take yourself off autopilot and to be more intentional. And you'd be like, why that? Why is that? It's really about having teams and leaders who are more engaged and more empowered. So it's just like the quote, you have to take some action here. So regardless of the scaling framework that I happened to be working in at the time, here are a few factors that really stood out to me. You need to consistently communicate your vision. You need to be genuine about focusing on your people. And you need to be intentional about creating your own path. So you're like, what does all of that mean? So let's get right into it. And we're going to start by communicate your vision consistently. So in order to keep moving forward, you have to know what your goals are and where you're trying to take your product or program that you're building. Now, some organizations focus on, you know, agile transformation as their goal. But is that really your goal? Your organization really doesn't exist just to become agile. Agile is just a better way for your organization to get where it needs to go. And now that you've captured your goals and vision, you have to communicate that vision out, whether it's a single product with multiple teams or a program that is spanning across your organization. And this is really important in a scaled environment because it helps your team stay focused around a common goal and act cohesively, even as they work as independent teams. And it also helps to tie operational planning all the way down to the decisions that your teams make on a daily basis. So now that you've crafted your vision and you're communicating it, the next step is to share it consistently. So you need to keep this vision out in front of your teams on a regular basis. It's not really a one and done thing. You have to keep sharing this vision with teams as a constant reminder of what the plan is and to make sure they stay on track and not accidentally go off the rails. And communicating your vision consistently is also important as your vision evolves. Things can change, as we all know, experiencing this pandemic. So as your goals change, your teams also need to be aware of that. And so I would equate this concept to flossing. You know, it's something that you should do on a regular basis to maintain healthy gums and also to avoid having your dentist get on your case about flossing. So, all right, so let's get into the examples. So here is an example of an anti-pattern I've seen, having no consistent understanding of project purpose. So in this particular example, I was on one of many teams in a project using the SAFE approach. And there was a lead product owner, but his role was muddled in the midst of lots of stakeholders. So there was a product vision that was communicated, but it was only shared once in PI planning. So that was like maybe one time in the span of 3 or 4 months at best. And really during PI planning, the vision wasn't the only thing that was being communicated, and it wasn't you know, standing out as something for the teams to focus on. So there was just so much information that we had to consume. And as a result of all of this, with so many activities going on, the vision really wasn't the shining guiding star it should have been of planning. And as time and iterations passed, you know, our focus would switch from what the vision actually was to keeping stakeholders happy. And whatever kept the stakeholders happy was not necessarily in line with the vision. So what I discovered from this experience is that the vision needs to be shared regularly to keep the teams focused on what we were collectively trying to achieve. And also that, you know, it was a safe environment. So maybe an opportunity would have had the release train engineer or the Scrum Masters work with the product management group to create some consistent reminders of the vision. So we knew what work was essential and what was nice to have. All right, so let's get out of that valley and look at an example of the peak of applying vision consistently. In this particular example at Secret Service, we had one product owner with many teams. And I worked with the product owner to develop a product vision statement. And I conducted a workshop with him as well as with like a business analyst and some tech leads, basically anybody who was important to the conversation. And we used a template to help the PO formulate a vision statement that he could communicate to the teams as well as to stakeholders. And then I also used the vision statement as an information radiator. Basically, you know, obviously in the times when we were all in co-located, I would put it in team rooms and on the team SharePoint sites, basically anywhere I thought that the teams could reference them on a regular basis. And then I also had found that the PO used the vision statement to develop a product roadmap, and it guided him in making MVP decisions. And it was used as a reference point also during sprint planning to help frame priority discussions between the PO and the teams and to really stay on track with the goals. And so as a result, by having the PO own the product vision statement, he now owned his goals and could focus future conversations with teams and stakeholders regarding the roadmap he had developed. And then it was also like regular reminders to help everyone stay focused on what really needed to be accomplished. And to have this, we're all moving in the same direction feeling, because that's really key and critical when you're in a skilled environment. But an interesting part was that it actually helped the dev teams make technical decisions about architecture. When they knew what was most important to the product owner in terms of goals, they made different decisions than they would have without that guidance. And then finally, you know, having a constant reference to the vision, the product owner and the team were able to determine MVP, especially when faced with time constraints. But I'm sure all of your projects are always on time, and that's nothing you ever have to worry about. Absolutely not. All right, let's have a little bit of a discussion. So what I'm going to do is have, I think I have most people paired up or in groups of 3. Let me just double check here really quick. And I'm gonna have you have a little conversation about vision. So first I'm gonna have you talk about, you know, do you have a vision for the project you're currently working on? And if yes, then, you know, talk about, has it helped you, or is there any way you can make it better? And if you don't have a vision, you know, talk about whether or not you can develop one, or if you see any challenges with developing one. So I'm going to paste all of these questions in the chat. Let me find the chat window real quick and dump these in there. All right, and I'm going to give you like 7 minutes to quickly have this conversation. All right, let me move people over. I think I got everybody. Oop. See a couple people back. And I think they're all off there.
Yeah, it looks like everybody joined.
Always tricky.
Anne is in the room by herself. Somebody
Oh,
dropped off. So
okay, so I'm gonna move
yeah.
to room
Christina's
7.
Christina's in a room by herself too.
Move to
I would put 3
8.
people in a room to be safe.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is make sure they're in the room 4. Make sure everybody, oh, see room 1 and is also in by herself all of a sudden.
8 people. Room 8 has 2 people, so maybe you want to move Anne to room 8.
Move her.
And Carla just joined. So.
All right.
Hey there. Sorry, I'm so late.
No worries.
All right, we're gonna move you into a room. So,
I'd go with 8 as well. Maybe.
okay. Let's see. All right. I'm just checking those rooms again.
Looks good now. We have 3 people at least in each room. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to balance them out ahead of time.
In the breakout sessions, I've noticed sometimes people don't want to participate, so it's always better to have more than just 2 people.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people will be there and nobody's participating. So
Somebody has to talk. You got 5 whole minutes.
yeah, I mean, I know some of these people, so I know, the ones that are usually ask questions and participate.
Right.
So, like room 7, I'm not worried about, and room 3, I'm not worried about.
Okay. Gotcha.
Should be good.
You know the folks. Mm. 5 minutes, but it goes very fast. There we go. Just trying to move this out of the way. Mm. Post it again just in case. Mm. We just have one in breakout rooms right now, but they'll be coming back shortly. Oh, you're on mute if you're talking.
Hi, sorry.
Hi.
I'm still trying to move my screen here from from this to that screen, but it's not moving. But anyways, sorry.
No worries.
I had something and I was trying to complete it. I was right there at 11:15 and still couldn't make it. Sorry.
It's okay. Everybody's coming back now.
Okay.
All right. We have everybody back. So I know time goes quickly. And on the interest of time, I'm going to push forward, but hopefully you can ask any questions at the end. All right, so let's move quickly into the second factor on focus on your people genuinely. So due to the sheer number of people who are involved in any agile scaling endeavor, centralized decision-making is not very effective. Just think about all of the bottlenecks that can happen. So taking decision-making power down to the individual team level is critical to be responsive to any of the changing needs that you'll encounter on any project. So, and also leaders say they support teams making a decision, but they actually have to put their collective mouths where, put the money where their mouths are, and actually commit to doing that, and not yank back control when they kind of get nervous. So we really need to provide support to create true empowerment. And also leaders can do their part by creating environments that fosters collaboration and cooperation and connection between teams so that they stay in sync and don't accidentally sit in silos. So think about this concept like someone asking you, how are you? And you actually tell them the truth, but they weren't really trying to hang around to find out what you were going to say. So that's really not about being genuine and caring genuinely about people. So we want to do the opposite of that. All right, let's go to the examples. All right, so in this Dilbert comment, he kind of gives an example of not being particularly people focused. I would say command and control much, maybe just a little bit. All right, so for the project in this example, it was made up of all distributed teams. And there was a governance team that handled a lot of the decision making. And how much decision making did the teams do? 0. And really, as a result of that, there was no sense of ownership. And the decisions that the governance team made weren't always best for all of the teams. So an example, the retros weren't very productive. In the team that I was in, the improvements were dictated and not discussed. So as a team, we didn't really have any ownership in our continuous improvement. And it also resulted in low morale on the teams. I mean, there was a general sense of apathy. For the team that I was on, even though we weren't all co-located, some of us were in the same building, but we didn't even attend stand-ups together. Everyone just called in. So needless to say, this environment wasn't inspiring for creative solutions. So what I discovered here is that teams need some kind of input into how decisions are made or what decisions were made for a sense of ownership and to have some skin in the game. And then leaders needed to develop some level of trust in the teams and create a collaborative environment for the teams to make decisions. And this is important in a scaled environment because when teams are detached and disengaged, they won't be motivated to come together to push towards that one common goal. And there's more at stake with multiple teams not being on the same page. There's more opportunity for things to fall through the cracks and cause delays. And with multiple teams, those delays can create a ripple effect as big as a tidal wave. All right, so let's get out of the valley and go to the peak of applying people focus. So in this case, it was at USCIS, and when new teams were established, they allowed the teams to pick team members to pick their own teams. So it was like a self-selection process. But before they even did that, they actually all came together to define what it meant to be a team. They developed a definition of ready to be a team based on skill set. And then after that, they self-identified for which teams they were going to join. But they also made decisions about tech structure, coding standards, pipeline health, coming up with refactoring norms to improve their code, and how to share information across teams. And the teams did a lot of experimenting. So at USCIS, each team would send one or more reps to Scrum of Scrums to discuss blockers, dependencies, any discoveries or changes in implementation, or any other hot topics. At Secret Service, the Scrum teams experimented with keeping separate backlogs, and for inter-team communication, they used scouts that would show up at each other's stand-ups and had joint refinement sessions to share information across teams. And at DOJ, they had the Scrum teams be responsible for epic decomposition for the epics they were working on, instead of having that being done by the program team. So all of this really resulted in, oh yeah, and I forgot to mention the leadership. And so leaders also supported and didn't challenge the decisions that teams made. So all of this really resulted in teams having more sense of ownership for the things they were building, since the decisions they made were theirs. And once they saw positive results from the decisions they made, they became more invested in the project's success. And at all of these agencies, team level decision-making also benefited leadership by delegating responsibilities to the teams. So they wouldn't have to be responsible for things like communication methods, technical improvements, and refinement process. And with the team's growth, the leadership developed and deepened their level of trust with the team's judgment. All right. So we're going to do a quick poll. Let me see if I can get this to come up. And I'm going to paste in the chat the link again for Mentee and move to the next question. So the first question is, think about what kind of decisions your teams can make right now. So just, one or two ideas, anything that just comes immediately to your mind. Let me just give a little countdown here. Think about, even whether that's lunch. I think when I've done this before, somebody said, we can make decisions about lunch. Or even about like sprint commitment or anything like that. Okay, work to be done. Schedule, sprint stories, team daily processes, training. Social is a good one. Okay. Third-party packages, interesting. Okay. Sprint stories. All right. Now, I want you to think about what kind of decisions do you wish your teams could make? Let's start a countdown for this one.
I don't think you've opened the poll for.
Oh, I did it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, well, I can't.
people. Oh,
It says the question is not open for voting.
oh, really? That's weird, because now I'm seeing people respond. Maybe.
Oh, you know what? I refreshed the screen and now.
Oh, okay. I was like, how are other people responding? Okay. All right. So the wish list includes technical implementations, prioritization, continuous improvement, team structure. Okay. All right. One final question, and it should be open. For the decision-making power you wished for, what is the cost of not having it right now? So what is the cost of not being able to control your team structure or some of the other things you mentioned and your continuous improvement? Low quality, technical debt, loss of ownership, continuous improvement delays. That is innovative. Yeah, I mean, general frustration, that's what it sounds like in some of these responses. All right, cool. Thanks for participating. And I'm trying to stay on time, so I'm going to quickly move into the final factor, which is create your own path intentionally. So if you haven't chosen a scaling framework, start by establishing something that's lightweight, that's just enough to keep teams connected and focused on the common goals. In this case, less is more. Having less predetermined structure in place allows you to customize more. And no two organizations operate in exactly the same way. Therefore, your scaling agility in your organization cannot be a one size fits all. Whatever approach you do use, it needs to be customized to work for your organization. And also, as teams explore and experiment, you should do the same thing with your scaling approach. Regularly inspect and adapt your scaling structure and, incorporate the things and methods or practices that have been successful and remove those that haven't worked. Just think of this concept like buying the highest rated backpack for a hike, but it doesn't fit you. It's too heavy. So no matter how many people gave it a 5-star rating and thought it was the most amazing thing, it still doesn't work for you as an individual because it's not the right size. So customize. So let's get into the examples. So one trap preventing you from creating your own path is using a very prescriptive framework, but the key here is not having any deviations whatsoever. So if you look at this steel frame construction, it best describes what happened in this example, having this very ridged in, boxed in feeling. So on this project, they were using very structured framework and following all the predefined rules, but they didn't change anything. So, you had your typical Scrum teams, probably a system team, product management team, and our system architect, but then, later on the configuration management and information architecture and information management and deployment operations. And I could go on and on, just a lot of overhead. And then with all of the activities, they were performed as originally recommended with no changes. So they followed PI planning to a T. The iteration schedule was what was initially proposed, and the INA workshop, which I'm calling Big Retro, happens as recommended. And as a result, I did not see any observable experimentation with the approach at all. So we were blindly marching forward within the structure. And I participated in, the iteration retros with my team, as well as what I call the big retro, but I didn't really see any of the changes that we had proposed actually happening. So what I discovered here is that teams needed room to experiment and improve on their processes, not just individually, but also collectively. And having this lack of flexibility in playing with the framework itself, teams really needed some room to switch around things that just weren't working for them. So here's an example of a peek of creating your own path. In this particular example, at both Secret Service and US courts, they were using Scrum, but not a formalized or predetermined scaling framework. So they were free to experiment on a lot of things. At Secret Service, they experimented on team structure. They had a tech lead on every team. And with retros, they had what I'd call a collective team retro, but no individual team retros. And for testing automation, there was some happening, but it wasn't used on all teams' work. And then at US courts, they changed the structure in how they were coordinating testing, and they experimented with lengths of sprints, and they also had what I'd call a collective team retro, but no individual team retros. And what this really resulted in, when they had less scaffolding around scaling, the teams didn't restrict themselves in what they could try and experiment with. And experimenting not just on team processes, but also on the scaling structure made space to learn and improve on an approach that was not normally considered. And at the same time, while working towards the same project goals, the teams gained more autonomy in establishing their own team practices. And they learned what did and didn't work for teams and for the scaling framework. For US courts, they ended up changing the length of their sprints. And then, but with the collective team retro experiment, they liked that and they kept it. But ultimately, customizing is what really influences the pace of their progress. All right, so after all of that trekking through peaks and valleys, what did that get us? Really, the message here is to keep discovering. Let the journey and what you learn along the way be the focus of your Agile scaling adventure. None of these factors that I talked about are easy to implement in an established organization, but they're crucial to make sure that Agile scaling helps and does not hinder your success. So the path will not be straight to your goals, but recognize that every twist and turn is an intentional pursuit of a new opportunity to grow. All right, so here's the challenge. What are you going to do? What can you commit to trying out? So you have to remember that transformation only happens when we act. So will you communicate your vision consistently, look for opportunities to radiate your vision often, and keep alignment amongst your teams and product owners? Or are you going to focus on your people genuinely and give the teams more decision-making power and create collaborative and cooperative environments so that they can truly be empowered to work better together? Or are you going to focus on creating your own path intentionally and inspect and adapt not just your team practices, but also your scaling approach, keeping what's working and getting rid of what's not, and basically changing as your organization changes? All right, that's all of my chatter. If you are interested in connecting with me, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Let me know how it's going, if you tried anything. And also a year ago, I worked with some Excel colleagues on creating the manifesto for scaling agility, which I shared some of it with you today. So please check it out. And if you're interested in having a conversation, we've gotten some feedback about it from thought leaders in the Agile community. But if you want to share some input, please contact me so I can invite you to the Slack space. So that's it. That's enough talking for me. And I will open the floor for anybody who has questions or comments.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicole. We have about 5 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, or you can type it in the chat, whichever is your preference.
How did the teams choosing their own makeup work out? That seems to me like a very heavy lift in terms of convincing people, because there's so many structures in terms of like who people report to and all that kind of entrenched hierarchy. So what was that like?
Well, I mean, at that particular engagement, it was all of the folks on the teams were from Excel. So it was all Excel BAs and software developers and Scrum Masters and everything. So there wasn't a lot of matrixing happening. So we didn't really have to worry about competing projects that they were working on. So that obviously alleviates some of that problem. And then otherwise, I think for the folks that they were very motivated to be self-directed. So they kind of welcomed having this opportunity to pick their own teams, because normally that's not something that they get to do. Most times when you get on a project, you're just like, you're going on team A or you're going on team B. So they were really invested in trying this and making it work so that they would actually be able to do it again. So that was the main driver. So like they didn't really have any competition in terms of, working on multiple projects at the same time.
Gotcha. So you cheated.
Well, since I work for a consulting company, we're always putting whole teams on projects. So
no, that's great.
There's less of that competition going on.
Yeah.
Another question that people have asked me before was, what kind of template did you use for like creating that product vision statement? And you can find plenty on Google, but if you read the Agile Samurai book, there is what's called the elevator pitch. And that is basically the framework that we use to develop the product vision statement. And I've used it several times. And if it doesn't help the product owner get to a vision, it also helps to uncover problems they have with what they think their vision is. Because on my current client, we've had multiple conversations as we've been trying to develop their vision. So if nothing else, it's good for starting conversations about, I was like, well, is this really what's important to you? So Agile Samurai.
So how did you overcome the problem where the team felt demotivated, especially after retrospectives, when they would participate in the retrospectives and yet not see any changes brought about based on what was discussed in the retrospectives?
Yeah, that was a definite rally. And for the time I was on that project, I did not observe a lot of changes happening. And so for me, I felt like that was a very big contributing factor to a lot of the issues that were happening on that particular project. It was, I don't know if it was a combination of, too much control by the governance team. But ultimately, what needs to happen in order to have any change in there is some letting go of the reins. So if there are a certain group of people who are controlling all of those decisions, then it's going to be very difficult for teams to feel any sense of ownership. And I think you'd have to start by trying to convince, like if there's a governance team or something like that, trying to convince them of any kind of small thing that you can identify to let the team try and experiment with. That seems non-threatening, so that you can actually build up that trust muscle with leadership if that's where the problem lies. I don't know if that's kind of helping address the issue that you're trying to solve, Smita.
Sure, it gives me a perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about those dynamics. So it's like if you're trying to move the needle, you have to find some way, some little thing you can do that to get some of the decision-making power to experiment for the teams, so they can try something and see if it works or not without it being, threatening to leadership as a super important decision that they don't want to let go of control.
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, it looks like that's it. Again, thanks a lot, Nicole, for joining us. This was fantastic. Reminder that our next event is on Wednesday, July 14th at 6 p.m. That one is going to be hosted by Ihab Al-Badri and the New York City Lean Kanban Group. And it's going to be kind of a hands-on activity. It's going to be a game in system dynamics. So make sure you join us for that event. And with that, have an awesome weekend, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome. Have a good weekend, everyone.